Congresswoman Susan Davis, a Democrat, captured nearly 58% of the vote in last week's primary. She will run against Republican Nick Popovich in a runoff election in November. Representative Davis is currently a member of the House Armed Services Committee and ranking member of the Military Personnel Subcommittee. She joins me now. Thanks for being here, Congresswoman.
Hi, nice to be with you.
So first, I just want to talk a little bit about your district, District 53. The lines were redrawn, and it's changed quite a bit, hasn't it?
It has changed. I think that people usually think of the 53rd District as a coastal district along with the sort of central San Diego. And basically the lines took us beginning around the Hillcrest, Mission Hills area, and then going east. The Lemon Grove community and parts of La Presa and Spring Valley have been part of the district, but now we pick up areas of the city of La Mesa, of course, a portion of El Cajon, areas of Del Cerro, Allied Gardens, and so it is quite different. We retained San Diego State University, which is where we are right now,
and still predominantly a Democrat district as well. I mentioned you're standing on two military committees. As you know, people here in San Diego are following the news of potential cuts, defense cuts. First, let's clarify. There's the round of budget cuts, but then there's something else that we're talking about in terms of a congressional subcommittee that did not reach a compromise, and now we may be subject to a 10% cut across the board.
That's right. The Budget Control Act really controlled what's happening in the committees right now, and certainly in the Armed Services Committee. So there were some targets that the Pentagon had, and we tried to meet them. The committee also as a whole, and that was the majority that made some decisions that the Pentagon had not necessarily sought, to keep some budgets, to increase some budgets. And so we still have to work through that as the Senate and the House come together in a conference report. But that's basically in process and done. What happened, and we use the word sequestration, and you've mentioned a little bit about how did we get there. Well, we got there basically because of the debt ceiling that we had to deal with. We had payroll tax cuts. We had a lot of issues that were coming together at one time. And it was felt that a group of individuals from both sides of the aisle and with the Senate could come to some agreement and could possibly stave off that kind of major cut, which is about 10% across all the areas of the government. And they were not successful at that. And so we now have this looming problem, and it's not just sequestration. There are a lot of problems that are coming together by the end of the year and the beginning of 2013. Tremendous challenges for the country. And we all want to see our way through out of this. I think there are some ways that we can do that, and part of it is how we deal with the extension of the Bush tax cuts, whether for the wealthiest individuals or for the middle class.
We've got 100,000 active military personnel here in San Diego. What is your biggest worry when you look at these two sets of cuts in terms of San Diego?
Well, right now, I think in the Budget Control Act, there are no real concerns per se in terms of the benefits that our men and women and their families receive, because we basically protected those, and I believe the Senate will do the same under the current negotiations.
So the salaries they receive, the benefits
they got the raise, the benefits didn't really change. There are some minor issues around prescription drug benefits, but not major issues that are really being debated. But there are some additional issues around some cuts for San Diego. But I think when we see our position now on the Pacific Rim, and even with the idea if there was a BRAC, and at this point it's not a real serious discussion, I think we're very well positioned, and so I don't think we're going to see problems. The problems will come if there is a 10% cut across the board. And the reason that our major defense industries are worried about this is because there are contracts which they have to adhere to, and yet if there's a 10% cut, what happens to those contracts? There's another way, I think, to get at that if we have to, but the best way to get at it is to see a balance, to have the revenues coming into the country. Particularly, I think we need to protect the middle class because this is still a very, very difficult economic time. But for those who are very wealthy and have certainly benefited, I think getting back to what really was during the Clinton era, we all did really very well at that time, and I think we can take a look at how we can come forward and do this better.
I want to pick up on that. We don't have a lot of time left, but you are running for re-election. So just a couple of areas with just some, yes or no responses. You mentioned a balance of revenues. So if re-elected, would you support raising taxes? And if so, what area would you like to target?
Well, I think we want to see this as a balance as best we can. But right now, as I said, I don't think we need to target the middle class. And I think we can keep those extensions. But really, the bulk of savings really came to those who have benefited from a good economy when the economy was strong. Everybody has taken a hit, but I think we need to continue. We need to pull out that extension of those tax cuts. But we also need to look at our tax code. A package that would really be honest and would say, what is it that we don't need to be doing anymore? We have agricultural subsidies that are being discussed right now. There are a whole range of issues that I think we could actually come together if we could just get people thinking more about compromise.
We are out of time, but we would love to invite you back closer to the election. Also have the Republican running against you, Nick Popovich, join you as well. And also I want to send people to our website, kpbs.org, because I know you had a much longer conversation with Maureen Cavanaugh earlier today, so people can hear that as well. Thank you so much.
Great. Good to be with you. Thank you.